A man walks into a luxury hotel wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt. The staff looks him up and down, refuses to give him a room, and calls security to throw him out. They even accuse him of trying to steal from the guests. What they don't realize is that this man is Keanu Reeves and he owns the entire hotel. But instead of revealing his identity and firing everyone on the spot, Keanu does something no one expects. What he uncovers next will shock you, because this wasn't just about rude employees. This was a conspiracy that went all the way to the top. Keep watching to find out what happens when one of Hollywood's most humble stars decides to fight back. Keanu Reeves had never been the type of celebrity who craved attention. He rode the subway and gave up his seat to strangers. Note: listen carefully. In the end, I ask questions. If you give me right answer, I give you free gifts. He treated everyone with respect. From studio executives to the homeless individuals he often chatted with on park benches. This was the man the world had come to admire, not just for his talent, but for his genuine heart. What most people did not know was that Keanu had quietly invested in a luxury hotel nearly 4 years ago. The Meridian Grand Hotel stood proudly on a prestigious boulevard in Los Angeles, its elegant facade blending old Hollywood glamour with modern sophistication. He had poured not just his money but his soul into making it one of the finest establishments on the West Coast, a place where every guest would feel welcomed and valued. For almost 4 years, he had trusted his management team to handle the daily operations. He attended board meetings occasionally and reviewed financial reports with his assistant Marcus Chen, but he had never experienced the hotel as an ordinary guest. He had always arrived in limousines, always been greeted by name, always received the treatment that came with being both the owner and a beloved celebrity. One autumn afternoon, an unusual thought crossed his mind. What was it really like to walk through those grand doors as a nobody? How did his staff treat guests who did not arrive in expensive cars or designer clothes? He had overheard someone at a charity event mention that luxury hotel often had 2 faces, one for the elite and another for everyone else. Keanu decided he needed to find out for himself. He pulled on a pair of faded jeans, the kind he wore when working on his motorcycles. He threw on a plain gray t-shirt, slightly wrinkled, and slipped his feet into worn sneakers. He completed the look with a baseball cap pulled low over his forehead. Without his usual polished appearance, he looked like any middle-aged man who might have wandered in off the street. He parked his modest pickup truck several blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. The Meridian Grand Hotel rose before him like a beacon of elegance, its towering glass facade reflecting the dying sunlight through the massive revolving doors. He could see the lobby adorned with crystal chandeliers, Italian marble floors, and fresh flower arrangements. This was his hotel. This was his dream made tangible. Keanu took a deep breath and pushed through the doors. He approached the front desk with a friendly smile. Behind the counter stood a young man in his late 20s, his uniform crisp and his posture rigid. His name tag read Victor. "Good evening," Keanu said warmly. "I was wondering if you might have any rooms available for tonight." Victor's eyes traveled slowly from Keanu's worn sneakers, up his faded jeans, past his wrinkled t-shirt, and finally to his face partially obscured by the baseball cap. Something shifted in his expression, a dismissive glint that Keanu had never seen directed at himself before. "I'm sorry," Victor said with practiced condescension, "but this hotel isn't really suited for someone like you." Keanu blinked, certain he had misheard. "Excuse me," Victor sighed as if explaining something to a child. "Meridian Grand is a luxury establishment. We cater to a certain caliber of clientele. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the budget hotels a few blocks down." The words hung in the air like a slap. Keanu felt his chest tighten from genuine shock. In all his years through personal tragedies that would have broken lesser men, he had never been spoken to quite like this. "I see," Keanu said slowly, keeping his voice calm. "And what exactly makes you think I can't afford to stay here?" Victor leaned forward slightly. "Sir, I've been doing this job for 3 years. I can spot someone who belongs here and someone who doesn't. Trust me, you don't belong here. Now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave before you make our actual guests uncomfortable." Keanu's mind raced. He could end this charade right now, pull out his identification, and watch this arrogant young man crumble. But something held him back. If this was how Victor treated a stranger, how many others had experienced the same humiliation? He decided to push further. "I'd like to speak to a manager," Keanu said, his voice remarkably controlled. Victor rolled his eyes. "That won't be necessary. The manager will tell you the same thing. We have standards here now. Please don't make me call security." "All right," Keanu said. "What about the restaurant? Perhaps I could at least get something to eat." Victor's smile was thin and cold. "The restaurant requires a reservation, and I'm quite certain they're fully booked." Without another word, Keanu walked toward the hotel's restaurant just off the main lobby. A young woman stood at the hostess stand, her name tag reading Amanda. "Good evening," Keanu said politely. "I was hoping to get a table for dinner." Amanda's eyes made the same judgmental journey from his shoes to his cap. "Do you have a reservation, sir?" "I don't, but I noticed you have several tables available." Amanda did not bother to look behind her. "Those tables are reserved for guests arriving later. I'm afraid we can't accommodate walk-ins tonight." Keanu gestured toward a clearly empty table near the window. "What about that one?" "As I said, sir, all of our tables are spoken for. Perhaps you could try the food court at the shopping center down the street." The food court. Keanu almost laughed at the absurdity. Here he was standing in the restaurant of a hotel he owned, being directed to a mall food court. "Let me ask you something," Keanu said. "Is it my clothes that bother you, or is there something else about my appearance that makes you think I don't deserve to eat here?" Amanda's cheeks flushed. "Sir, the Meridian Grant has a certain atmosphere we strive to maintain. Our regular guests expect a certain environment. I'm sure you understand." Keanu understood perfectly, and what he understood made his heart heavy with sadness. He was about to respond when Victor appeared, flanked by two security guards in dark suits. Their expressions were serious, their hands clasped in front of them. "Sir," Victor called out loudly, drawing the attention of several guests. "I thought I made it clear that you needed to leave." Keanu turned to face them, aware of the eyes, now watching. A well-dressed couple quickly moved away. A family with children ushered their kids toward the elevator as if shielding them from something dangerous. "Is there a problem here?" Keanu asked calmly. One of the security guards stepped forward. "Sir, we've received complaints about your behavior. You're making our guests uncomfortable. We're going to have to ask you to leave. Complaints from whom I haven't spoken to anyone except your staff. And I've been nothing but polite." Victor crossed his arms smugly. "This is private property. We have the right to refuse service to anyone. Now you can leave voluntarily or these gentlemen can escort you out." Keanu looked at the security guards, then at Victor, then at Amanda. He looked at the guests watching, some with curiosity, others with relief that the situation was being handled. Not one of them questioned whether this treatment was justified. The fire in Keanu's chest was not rage. It was profound disappointment in the institution he had built. He had created this hotel to be a sanctuary for all, and instead it had become a place where people were judged and discarded based on appearance. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll leave." "A wise decision, sir," Victor said, unable to keep the triumph out of his voice. Keanu walked slowly toward the exit, the security guards trailing behind him with each step across the marble floor. Questions churned in his mind. How long had this been going on? How many people had been humiliated in a place meant to welcome them? As the glass doors closed behind him and the cool night air washed over his face, Keanu stood on the sidewalk for a long moment. He pulled out his phone and called Marcus Chen. "Hey, Keanu. Everything okay?" Keanu stared back at the hotel, its grand facade now seeming like a beautiful mask hiding something ugly. "Marcus, we have a serious problem. I need you to meet me first thing tomorrow morning. Clear your schedule." "Of course." "What happened?" Keanu watched as a well-dressed couple emerged from a limousine and were immediately greeted with warm smiles and eager assistance. The contrast to his own experience could not have been more stark. "I just got thrown out of my own hotel," Keanu said, "and I need to find out why." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. This was not going to be a simple fix. What he had witnessed was not the work of two rude employees. It was something systematic, something that had been allowed to grow in the shadows of his beautiful hotel. Tomorrow would bring a new plan, but tonight, as Keanu walked back to his truck, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had happened. He thought about all the people who had likely experienced the same treatment, but had no power to fight back. They had simply walked away, carrying the wound of humiliation, while his hotel continued operating, oblivious to the damage it was causing. Not anymore, Keanu whispered to himself. Not on my watch. He started the engine and pulled away, leaving the Meridian Grand Hotel glittering in his rearview mirror. The hotel looked so beautiful from the outside, so perfect, but Keanu now knew that beauty could be deceiving, that the most elegant exterior could hide the ugliest truths. The next morning arrived with a gray sky hanging over Los Angeles, the kind of overcast day that matched the heaviness in Keanu's heart. He had barely slept the night before, his mind replaying every moment of the humiliation he had experienced at his own hotel. Every dismissive glance from Victor, every cold word from Amanda, every judgmental stare from the guests who watched him being escorted out like a criminal. He arrived at his private office in Santa Monica just before 8 in the morning. The space was modest compared to what most people would expect from a Hollywood star. Just a simple room with a desk, a few comfortable chairs, and walls lined with books rather than awards or memorabilia. This was where Keanu came to think, to plan, to handle the business side of his life, away from the chaos of the entertainment industry. Marcus Chen was already waiting for him. 2 cups of coffee on the desk and a concerned expression on his face. Marcus had been Keanu's assistant for over 6 years, and in that time he had become more than just an employee. He was a trusted confidant, someone who understood Keanu's values and shared his commitment to treating people with dignity and respect. You sounded serious on the phone last night, Marcus said as Keanu settled into his chair. What happened? Keanu took a long sip of coffee before answering. He recounted everything from the moment he walked through the door of the Meridian Grand to the moment he was escorted out by security. He described Victor's condescending tone, Amanda's dismissive attitude, and the way the other guests had looked at him as if he were something unpleasant that needed to be removed. Marcus listened in silence, his expression shifting from surprise to disbelief to anger. When Keanu finished, Marcus leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. That's unbelievable, Marcus said, shaking his head. In your own hotel, the place you built. Keanu nodded. But here's the thing, Marcus. I don't think this is just about me. I don't think Victor and Amanda woke up yesterday and decided to be rude to one person. This felt systematic, practiced, like they've done it before. Marcus' eyes narrowed. You think there's something bigger going on? I do, Keanu replied, and I need to find out how deep it goes, but I can't do that as Keanu Reeves, the owner. The moment anyone realizes who I am, they'll put on their best behavior. I need to experience this hotel the way a regular guest does. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing what Keanu was suggesting. You want to go undercover? Exactly. I want you to book a room for me under a different name. I'll check in, stay for a night or two, and see how the staff treats me when they think I'm nobody important. Marcus nodded slowly, already pulling out his laptop. What name do you want to use? Keanu thought for a moment. John Mitchell. Simple, forgettable. And what about your appearance? They might recognize you from last night. I'll dress differently this time, a little more polished but nothing fancy. I want to see if their behavior changes based on clothes alone or if there's something else at play. Marcus typed quickly, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I'm booking you a standard room for 2 nights. Starting this evening, I'll use a prepaid card so there's no paper trail leading back to you. Perfect, Keanu said. And Marcus, I need you to be ready. If I find what I think I'm going to find, we'll need to act fast. I've got your back. Marcus replied without hesitation, whatever you need. Later that evening, Keanu stood outside the Meridian Grand Hotel once again. This time he wore a button-down shirt tucked into dark slacks with polished shoes and a simple blazer. He had trimmed his beard neatly and combed his hair back. He looked respectable, the kind of guest who might be a businessman traveling for work or a tourist treating himself to a nice stay. He took a deep breath and walked through the revolving doors. The lobby was just as magnificent as it had been the night before, but Keanu barely noticed the chandeliers or the marble floors this time. His attention was focused on the front desk where a different employee stood waiting. This was a woman in her 30s with a professional smile and a name tag that read Catherine. "Good evening, sir," Catherine said warmly as Keanu approached. "Welcome to the Meridian Grand. How may I assist you?" "I have a reservation under the name John Mitchell," Keanu replied. Keeping his voice neutral, Catherine typed the name into her computer, her smile never wavering. "Yes, Mr. Mitchell. I see you're staying with us for 2 nights. Wonderful. May I see your identification and a credit card for incidentals?" Keanu handed over a driver's license that Marcus had arranged. Along with the prepaid card, Catherine processed everything efficiently, made a copy of the documents and handed him a key card. "You'll be in room 412. Mr. Mitchell, the elevators are just around the corner to your left. Is there anything else I can help you with this evening?" "No, thank you," Keanu said, genuinely surprised by the pleasant interaction. "You've been very helpful." As he walked toward the elevators, Keanu felt a strange mix of relief and confusion. The check-in had gone smoothly. Catherine had been professional and courteous. Maybe last night really had been an isolated incident. Maybe Victor and Amanda were just 2 bad employees in an otherwise well-run hotel. But something in his gut told him not to relax just yet. The room was exactly what he expected from a standard accommodation at the Meridian Grand. It was clean, comfortable, and tastefully decorated with a queen-sized bed, a small desk, and a window overlooking the city. Not the luxurious suite he would normally occupy, but perfectly adequate for his purposes. Keanu settled in, hanging his jacket in the closet and placing his small overnight bag on the luggage rack. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked around, trying to see the room through the eyes of an ordinary guest. Everything seemed fine so far. After about an hour, he decided to test another aspect of the hotel's service. He picked up the phone and called room service, ordering a simple meal, a grilled chicken sandwich with a side salad. "Thank you for your order, Mr. Mitchell," the voice on the other end said. "Your food will be delivered in approximately 30 minutes. Keanu hung up and waited. Exactly 32 minutes later, there was a knock on his door. He opened it to find a man in his 40s dressed in the hotel's room service uniform pushing a cart with his meal. The man's name tag read, "Gerald, your order." "Sir," Gerald said, his voice flat, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," Keanu replied, stepping aside to let Gerald wheel the cart into the room. As Gerald set up the tray on the small desk, Keanu noticed something subtle but unmistakable. The man's movements were stiff, his demeanor cold. There was no warmth in his service, no effort to make the guest feel welcomed. It was as if Gerald was performing a task he found distasteful. "Is everything all right?" Keanu asked, trying to engage Gerald in conversation. Gerald barely glanced at him. "Everything's fine, sir. Enjoy your meal." Keanu reached for his wallet and pulled out a generous tip. Holding it out to Gerald, the man took it without a word, his eyes flickering briefly to Keanu's face before looking away. There was something in that glance, a hint of judgment, of dismissal. "Thank you," Gerald said curtly, then turned and left without another word. Keanu stood in the doorway, watching Gerald disappear down the hallway. The interaction had been brief, but it confirmed what he had suspected. The problem at this hotel wasn't limited to Victor and Amanda. There was something deeper, a culture of judgment that seemed to permeate at least part of the staff. He ate his meal in silence, his mind working through possibilities. Who was responsible for this? Was it a few bad employees? Or was there someone higher up setting the tone? He needed more information. About 2 hours later, just as Keanu was preparing to turn in for the night, there was another knock on his door. This one was louder, more insistent. He opened the door to find 2 security guards standing in the hallway, their expressions serious. One of them was the same guard who had escorted him out the night before. "Mr. Mitchell," the guard asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Yes, that's me," Keanu replied, keeping his voice calm despite the anger rising in his chest. "Is there a problem, sir? We've received a complaint about your presence in the hotel. We're going to need you to come with us." Keanu stared at them in disbelief. "A complaint? What kind of complaint? I've been in my room all evening. I ordered room service and that's it. I haven't bothered anyone." The guard's expression didn't change. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, sir, but we need you to leave the premises. This is ridiculous," Keanu said, his voice rising slightly. "I paid for this room. I'm a registered guest. You can't just throw me out without any explanation." "Sir, please don't make this difficult." Keanu took a deep breath, fighting to control his temper. "I want to speak to the manager right now." The two guards exchanged a glance. One of them spoke into a radio, and after a brief conversation, he nodded. "The manager is on his way, sir." They stood in awkward silence for several minutes until a man in a tailored suit appeared at the end of the hallway. He was in his late 40s with graying hair and a face that seemed perpetually anxious. As he approached, Keanu noticed his name tag. "Daniel Foster, General Manager. Good evening, sir." Daniel said, his voice carrying a forced calmness. "I understand there's been some confusion." "Confusion?" Keanu replied, "I've been asked to leave my room twice now, and no one can tell me why. What exactly is going on at this hotel?" Daniel's eyes flickered nervously. "Sir, we've received reports that you've been making some of our guests uncomfortable. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. But perhaps it would be best if you found accommodations elsewhere tonight. We'd be happy to refund your stay." Keanu felt the anger boiling inside him now. Making guests uncomfortable, how? By existing, by having the audacity to book a room and order a sandwich. Daniel shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Sir, I don't want any trouble. I'm just trying to resolve this situation peacefully, and I'm trying to understand why your staff keeps treating me like I don't belong here." Keanu shot back. "This is the second time in 2 days I have been asked to leave this hotel. Last night, your front desk clerk refused to even check if you had rooms available. Tonight, your room service employee looked at me like I was beneath him. And now security's at my door with some vague complaint that no one can explain." Daniel's face went pale. "Last night you were here last night too, yes?" Keanu said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "And I think it's time you knew exactly who you're dealing with." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his real identification, the one that showed his actual name. He held it up so Daniel could see it clearly. "My name is Keanu Reeves. I own this hotel." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Daniel's face cycled through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, recognition, and finally pure terror. "Mr. Reeves," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry." "If I had known, that's exactly the problem," Keanu interrupted, his voice cold but controlled. "You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with basic respect, and neither should anyone else who walks through those doors." Daniel looked like he might collapse on the spot. The security guards had taken several steps back, their confident demeanor completely evaporated. "I want answers," Keanu continued. "I want to know why your staff has been treating guests this way. I want to know how long it's been going on, and I want to know who's responsible." "Mr. Reeves, I assure you, this isn't how we operate," Daniel said desperately. "There must be some mistake. Our staff is trained to treat all guests with the highest level of service." Keanu shook his head slowly. "I've experienced your service firsthand, Daniel, twice, and I can tell you there's nothing high-level about it. Someone in this hotel has been setting a very different standard, and I intend to find out who." He stepped forward, and Daniel instinctively stepped back. "Here's what's going to happen," Keanu said. "Tomorrow morning, you're going to provide me with complete access to all employee records, guest complaints, and any other documentation I request, and you're going to help me get to the bottom of this. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded frantically, his face ashen. "Yes, Mr. Reeves. Of course, whatever you need. I'll have everything ready first thing in the morning." "Good," Keanu said. "And Daniel, not a word of this to anyone. I want to see how deep this problem goes before anyone has a chance to cover their tracks." "Yes, sir. I understand." Keanu dismissed the security guards with a look, and they quickly disappeared down the hallway. Daniel lingered for a moment, clearly wanting to say something more, but thinking better of it. "I'll see you at 8. Keanu said. "Don't be late." Daniel nodded once more and hurried away, leaving Keanu standing alone in the doorway of his room. He stepped back inside and closed the door, leaning against it for a moment as he collected his thoughts. The confrontation had been necessary, but it had also been exhausting. He had hoped to uncover evidence of a few bad employees, something that could be fixed with some terminations and retraining. But the more he learned, the more he suspected that the problem ran much deeper than individual staff members. He pulled out his phone and called Marcus. "How did it go?" Marcus asked immediately. "Not good," Keanu replied. "I got thrown out again. But this time, I revealed who I am. The manager nearly had a heart attack. What's our next move?" Keanu walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. "Tomorrow I'm meeting with the manager to go through all the records. I need you to dig into the background of anyone in a leadership position at this hotel. Something tells me there's someone behind all of this, someone who's been setting the tone from the top." "I'm on it," Marcus said. "I'll have a report ready by morning." "Thanks, Marcus. And be careful. If there's something rotten going on here, the people responsible aren't going to want us poking around." He ended the call and stood at the window for a long time, watching the traffic flow through the streets below. Somewhere out there, people were going about their lives unaware of the small dramas playing out in hotels and offices and homes across the city. Keanu had spent his career telling stories on screen, but this story was real and the stakes were higher than any movie. He thought about all the guests who had been treated the way he was treated. How many of them had simply accepted the humiliation and walked away? How many had assumed they had done something wrong, that they somehow deserved to be made to feel small? The thought made his chest ache. This wasn't just about his hotel anymore. This was about something bigger. About the way people judged others based on appearance. About the systems that allow prejudice to flourish in the shadows. Keanu had always tried to treat everyone with kindness and respect, but he realized now that he had been naive about how the world worked. He had assumed that his employees shared his values simply because he had built the company. He had been wrong. Tomorrow, the real investigation would begin. Tomorrow he would start pulling back the layers of whatever had infected his hotel. And whatever he found, however deep the rot went, he was determined to cut it out completely. The following morning, Keanu arrived at the Meridian Grand Hotel at exactly 8:10. This time he walked through the front doors not as John Mitchell, not as a disheveled stranger, but as himself. He wore a simple black jacket over a dark shirt. His demeanor calm, but his eyes sharp with purpose. The staff members who recognized him froze in their tracks. Whispers rippling through the lobby like wine through tall grass. Daniel Foster was waiting for him near the concierge desk, looking as though he had not slept at all. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes, and his usually neat hair was slightly disheveled. He clutched a folder of documents against his chest like a shield. "Mr. Reeves," Daniel said, his voice tight with anxiety. "I've gathered everything you requested. Employee files, guest complaint records, service logs from the past 2 years. "Good," Keanu replied. "Let's go somewhere private." Daniel led him through a door marked staff only, down a carpeted hallway, and into a conference room on the executive floor. The room was elegant but impersonal, with a long mahogany table surrounded by leather chairs and windows that overlooked the city skyline. Daniel spread the documents across the table, his hands trembling slightly. Before they could begin, the door opened and Marcus Chen walked in, carrying a laptop bag over his shoulder. He nodded at Keanu and took a seat at the table, opening his laptop immediately. "I've been doing some research of my own," Marcus said, "and I think you're going to want to hear what I found." Keanu gestured for him to continue. Marcus turned the laptop screen so both Keanu and Daniel could see it. "I pulled guest reviews from multiple platforms, not just the official hotel webs, but independent travel sites, social media, everywhere I could find feedback. Then I sorted them by demographics where possible and cross-referenced with the dates of stays." "What did you find?" Keanu asked. Marcus clicked through several spreadsheets and graphs. There's a clear pattern. Guests who fit a certain profile consistently report worse experiences, longer wait times, room assignment issues, unresponsive staff, unexplained charges, and the complaints aren't random. They cluster around specific time periods and specific staff members. Keanu leaned forward, studying the data. This isn't just a few bad employees, is it? No, Marcus replied grimly. This is systematic. Someone has been running a deliberate operation to provide different levels of service to different types of guests, and it's been going on for at least 3 years, probably longer. Daniel's face had gone pale. I had no idea, he whispered. I noticed some things over the years. Small incidents that seemed off, but I never imagined it was this organized. Keanu turned to look at him. You noticed things, and you didn't investigate. Daniel swallowed hard, unable to meet Keanu's eyes. I should have. I know I should have. But every time I started asking questions, I was told to focus on my own responsibilities. I was told that certain matters were being handled by someone more senior. Who told you that? Keanu asked, his voice quiet but intense. Daniel hesitated, fear flickering across his face. Mr. Harrison, he finally said, the head of guest relations. He's been with the hotel for almost 8 years. He has a lot of influence here. Keanu and Marcus exchanged a glance. Tell me more about Mr. Harrison, Keanu said. Daniel took a deep breath as if preparing to cross a line he could not uncross. His name is Richard Harrison. He was hired about a year before you acquired the hotel, Mr. Reeves. He came with excellent references and a reputation for maintaining high standards. At first, everything seemed fine, but over time I started noticing that he had very specific ideas about what kind of guests belonged at the Meridian Grand. What kind of ideas? Marcus pressed. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. He never said anything explicitly discriminatory. He was too smart for that. But he would make comments about maintaining the hotel's image, about ensuring that our clientele matched the prestige of the establishment. And whenever there was a complaint from a certain type of guest, he would handle it personally. Most of those complaints just disappeared. Keanu felt his jaw tighten. So Harrison has been filtering complaints, making sure I never saw them. It seems that way, Daniel admitted. And that's not all. A few months ago, I noticed some irregularities in the financial records. Small amounts at first, things that could be explained away as accounting errors, but they kept adding up. What kind of irregularities? Daniel reached into his folder and pulled out a stack of papers covered in numbers, payments to vendors that don't exist, service fees that were never actually rendered, refunds that were processed but never actually given to guests. It's subtle, spread across dozens of transactions, but when you add it all up, it's significant. Marcus took the papers and began scanning through them, his expression growing darker with each page. This is embezzlement, he said flatly. Someone has been stealing from the hotel. And you think Harrison is behind it? Keanu asked Daniel. Daniel nodded slowly. I can't prove it yet, but the timing matches up. The irregularity started about 2 years ago. Right around the time Harrison took over more financial responsibilities, he convinced the board to give him oversight of certain operational budgets, said it would improve efficiency. Keanu stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. His hotel, his dream, had been corrupted from within, not just by prejudice but by greed. The two poisons had intertwined, creating something toxic that had been spreading through the Meridian Grand for years. Is there anyone else who can confirm this? Keanu asked without turning around. Any other employees who have seen what Harrison has been doing? Daniel thought for a moment. There might be one person. Elena Rodriguez. She's worked in housekeeping for about 6 years. She's one of the most dedicated employees we have, and she sees everything that happens in this hotel. If anyone knows the truth, it's her. Can you arrange for me to speak with her? Keanu asked. Daniel hesitated. She's very private and she's afraid of losing her job. She has a family to support, but I can try. Do it, Keanu said. Tell her that whatever she shares will be kept confidential and that no one will lose their job for telling the truth. Later that afternoon, Keanu found himself sitting in the employee break room, a modest space with vending machines, a few tables and fluorescent lighting that hummed softly overhead. Across from him sat Elena Rodriguez, a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and hands that showed the wear of years of hard work. She wore her housekeeping uniform and clutched a cup of coffee as if drawing strength from its warmth. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me," Keanu said gently. "I know this isn't easy." Elena looked at him with a mixture of wariness and hope. "Mr. Foster said I could trust you," he said. "You're trying to fix things." "I am," Keanu replied. "But I can't fix what I don't understand. I need to know what's really been happening at this hotel." Elena took a deep breath, her eyes distant, as if looking back through years of memories. "When I first started here, this was a good place to work. The staff respected each other and we took pride in taking care of every guest. But things started changing a few years ago after Mr. Harrison took over guest relations." "What kind of changes?" Elena set down her coffee cup, her fingers wrapping around each other nervously. "At first, it was just little comments. Mr. Harrison would talk about the hotel's image, about how we needed to attract the right kind of clientele. Then he started holding meetings with the supervisors, private meetings that regular staff weren't invited to." "What happened in those meetings?" Elena's voice dropped lower. "I don't know everything, but I heard things. The supervisors started giving us instructions. They would point out certain guests and tell us not to go out of our way for them. Don't spend too much time on that room. Don't be too friendly. Make sure they don't get the good towels." Keanu felt sick to his stomach, and people followed these instructions. "Some did," Elena said sadly. "The ones who wanted to get promoted. The ones who were afraid of Mr. Stace Harrison. He has a way of making people feel like they have to go along with him. If you question him, you find yourself with the worst shifts, the hardest assignments. A few people who complained too loudly just disappeared, transferred to other properties, or let go for made-up reasons." "Did you ever follow those instructions?" Keanu asked. Not accusingly, but with genuine curiosity. Elena shook her head firmly. "Never. My mother taught me that every person deserves respect, no matter how they look or how much money they have. I clean every room the same way, treat every guest the same way, but it's been hard watching what's been happening and feeling like I couldn't do anything about it." Keanu reached across the table and placed his hand gently on hers. "You're doing something about it right now. Your courage in speaking up could change everything." Elena's eyes glistened with tears. She was fighting to hold back. "There's something else you should know," she said, quietly. "Something I've never told anyone." Keanu leaned forward. "What is it?" Elena glanced toward the door, making sure no one was listening. "Mr. Harrison, he doesn't work alone. I've seen him meeting with someone, a man in expensive suits who doesn't work at the hotel. They meet late at night in Mr. Harrison's office, or sometimes in the parking garage. I don't know who he is, but Mr. Harrison treats him like a boss, like someone he answers to." Keanu's blood ran cold. "Do you know anything else about this man? What he looks like? What kind of car he drives?" "He's older, maybe late 50s or early 60s. Gray hair, very distinguished looking. He drives a black Mercedes with a personalized license plate. I only saw it once, but I remember thinking it was strange. The plate said something like Caldwell or Caldwin." Marcus, who had been quietly taking notes in the corner, suddenly looked up. "Caldwell. Are you sure?" Elena nodded. "I think so. Does that name mean something?" Marcus and Keanu exchanged a look that carried the weight of terrible understanding. Marcus pulled up something on his laptop and turned the screen toward Elena. "Is this the man you saw?" Elena studied the photograph for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes, that's him. Who is he?" Keanu's voice was heavy when he answered. "His name is Richard Caldwell. He's a member of the hotel's board of directors. He's been an investor since before I acquired the property." The room fell silent as the implication sank in. This wasn't just a corrupt employee running a discriminatory scheme. This went all the way to the top, to someone who had been sitting in board meetings, shaking Keanu's hand, smiling and nodding while secretly poisoning everything. The Meridian Grand was supposed to represent. Elena looked frightened now. "I shouldn't have said anything. If Mr. Caldwell finds out I talked to you, If Mr. Harrison finds out, nothing is going to happen to you. Keanu said firmly, I promise you that from this moment on, you're under my personal protection. No one is going to retaliate against you for telling the truth. Elena searched his face, looking for any sign of deception. Finding none, she nodded slowly. What are you going to do? Keanu stood up, his expression hardening with resolve. I'm going to do what I should have done a long time ago. I'm going to clean house. As Elena left the break room, Keanu turned to Marcus. We need to move carefully. Harrison is dangerous, but Caldwell is the real threat. He has connections, resources, and he's clearly been planning this for years. Marcus nodded. What's our next step? Keanu thought for a moment. We need more evidence. The financial records Daniel gave us are a start, but we need something that directly ties Caldwell to the scheme. If we move too soon, he'll find a way to cover his tracks and pin everything on Harrison. Marcus closed his laptop. I'll dig deeper into Caldwell's background. There might be other businesses, other connections we don't know about yet. Good, Keanu said. And I'll have another conversation with Daniel. If Caldwell has been meeting with Harrison at the hotel, there might be security footage, visitor logs, something we can use. As they prepared to leave the break room, Keanu's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He looked at the screen and felt his stomach drop. The message was from Daniel Foster. We need to talk urgently. I found something about Harrison and Caldwell, but I think they know I've been helping you. I'm scared. Meet me in the parking garage at 9 tonight. Come alone. Keanu showed the message to Marcus, whose face immediately clouded with concern. This could be a trap, Marcus said. Caldwell could be using Daniel to get to you. Maybe, Keanu admitted, but if Daniel really has found something, we can't ignore it. This might be our only chance to get the evidence we need. Then I'm coming with you, Marcus insisted. Keanu shook his head. The message says to come alone. If they see you, they might not shook their hand. I need to do this. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew Keanu well enough to recognize when his mind was made up. At least let me be nearby. I'll wait in the car, ready to call for help if anything goes wrong. Keanu considered this for a moment, then nodded. All right, but stay out of sight. I don't want to spook anyone until we know what we're dealing with. As the hours ticked by toward 9, Keanu found himself preparing for a confrontation he knew could change everything. He had come to the Meridian Grand, hoping to experience his hotel through the eyes of an ordinary guest. Instead, he had uncovered a web of corruption that reached higher than he ever imagined. Tonight, he would learn just how deep that web went, and whatever he found, he was determined to tear it apart, no matter the cost. The parking garage beneath the Meridian Grand Hotel was a cavern of shadows and silence. At 9 that night, fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting pale pools of illumination between stretches of darkness. The air was thick with the smell of concrete and motor oil, and every sound echoed off the walls with an unsettling clarity. Keanu walked slowly through the garage, his footsteps announcing his presence with each step. He had left Marcus in a car parked on the street level, close enough to respond if something went wrong, but far enough to remain unseen. His phone was in his pocket. And before entering the garage, he had activated the voice recording app. Whatever happened tonight, there would be a record. Daniel Keanu called out, his voice bouncing off the concrete pillars. Are you here? For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, from somewhere deeper in the garage came the sound of a door creaking open. Mr. Reeves. Daniel's voice echoed from the shadows. Over here, I found something you need to see. Keanu moved toward the voice, passing rows of expensive cars that belonged to the hotel's wealthy guests. As he rounded a corner near the service elevator, he spotted Daniel standing in front of a heavy metal door marked Authorized Personnel Only. The manager's face was pale, his eyes darting nervously. What did you find? Keanu asked as he approached. But before Daniel could answer, the door behind him swung open and 2 figures emerged from the darkness. Keanu recognized them immediately. The first was Richard Harrison, the head of guest relations, his face wearing a cold, calculating expression. The second was an older man with silver hair and an expensive suit. The same man Elena had described meeting with Harrison late at night. Richard Caldwell. "Good evening, Mr. Reeves," Caldwell said, his voice smooth and cultured. "I'm so glad you could join us." Keanu's instincts screamed danger, but he forced himself to remain calm. He glanced at Daniel, whose expression had shifted from nervousness to something that looked almost like guilt. "Daniel, what's going on?" Keanu asked quietly. Daniel couldn't meet his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reeves. They knew I was helping you. They said if I didn't cooperate, they would ruin me, destroy my career, my family. I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," Keanu replied, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You just made the wrong one." Caldwell chuckled softly, stepping forward into the light. "Don't be too hard on him, Mr. Reeves. Daniel is simply a pragmatist. He understands how the world really works. It's a shame you never learned that lesson." Harrison moved to block the path back to the main garage. His arms crossed over his chest. Keanu was effectively trapped, surrounded by concrete walls with only one exit now, guarded by men who clearly meant him harm. "So this is what it comes to," Keanu said, looking from Harrison to Caldwell, "luring me into a parking garage in the middle of the night. I expected more sophistication from a board member." Caldwell's smile faded slightly. "Sophistication is for boardrooms and charity galas. Mr. Reeves, when it comes to protecting what I've built, I prefer directness." "What you've built," Keanu repeated, an edge creeping into his voice. "You mean the system of discrimination you've been running in my hotel? The scheme to treat certain guests like they don't matter? The money you've been stealing?" Caldwell's expression hardened. "Your hotel. You think because you signed some papers and wrote some checks. This place belongs to you. I've been in this business for 35 years. Mr. Reeves, I was running hotels when you were still doing bit parts in television shows. The Meridian Grand was mine long before you came along with your celebrity money and your naive ideas about treating everyone equally." Harrison stepped forward, emboldened by his mentor's confidence. "Do you have any idea how much revenue we've generated by cultivating the right clientele? The guests who matter, the ones with real money and real influence. They come here because they know they'll be surrounded by people like themselves. They pay premium prices for that exclusivity." Keanu felt a cold fury building in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "So, you decided that some people are worth more than others based on how they look or what they wear. You turned my hotel into a place where people are judged and humiliated because they don't fit your idea of acceptable." Caldwell shrugged, as if discussing a minor business decision. "It's not personal, Mr. Reeves. It's economics. Certain types of guests bring down the atmosphere. They make the valuable guest uncomfortable. By managing who feels welcome here, we've increased profits significantly." "At what cost?" Keanu demanded. "How many people have walked out of this hotel feeling worthless? How many have carried that humiliation with them for days, weeks, years? You talk about economics, but you've forgotten that this industry is about people. Real human beings with feelings and dignity." Harrison laughed dismissively. "Dignity doesn't pay the bills, Mr. Reeves. Money does, and if a few people get their feelings hurt along the way, that's just the price of doing business." Keanu shook his head slowly. "You know, I've met a lot of people in my life. Some of them had nothing, lived on the streets, struggled just to survive, and some of them had everything. Wealth beyond imagining. Power that could make or break careers. But I learned something important along the way. A person's worth has nothing to do with their bank account or their appearance. It comes from how they treat others, especially those who can do nothing for them in return." Caldwell's patience seemed to be wearing thin. "Spare me the philosophy lesson. You're a movie star, Mr. Reeves. You live in a fantasy world where good triumphs over evil and everyone gets a happy ending. But this is reality, and in reality, people like me always win." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to something almost threatening. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk away from this investigation. You're going to tell your assistant and anyone else you've involved that it was all a misunderstanding, and you're going to let us continue running this hotel the way it should be run, and if I refuse," Keanu asked calmly, Caldwell smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we'll make sure your reputation suffers. We have connections in the media, Mr. Reeves. We can plant stories, create scandals, turn public opinion against you, and if that's not enough, we can make things very difficult for your other business ventures as well. You're not the only one with power, and unlike you, we're not afraid to use it. Keanu was silent for a long moment, letting Caldwell's threats hang in the air. Then, slowly, he began to smile. "You know what I find interesting?" Keanu said, reaching into his pocket. "You've spent so much time building your little empire of prejudice and greed that you forgot the most basic rule of any operation." Caldwell frowned. "What are you talking about?" Keanu pulled out his phone and held it up. "Always assume someone is recording." The color drained from Caldwell's face as he realized what Keanu was saying. Harrison took a step back, his confident expression crumbling into panic. "Everything you just said," Keanu continued, "every threat, every admission, every justification for your discrimination and theft, it's all been recorded, and it's already been sent to my assistant, along with instructions to forward it to the authorities if I don't check in within the next 10 minutes. "You're bluffing," Caldwell said, but his voice had lost its smoothness. "Am I?" Keanu replied. "You've spent years hiding in the shadows, manipulating people, using fear and money to get what you want. But you made a mistake tonight. You thought I was just another obstacle to be removed. You underestimated what happens when someone decides that doing the right thing is more important than protecting themselves." Caldwell's face contorted with rage. "You think you've won. You think a recording is going to stop me. I have lawyers who will tear that apart. I have connections that will make sure this never sees the inside of a courtroom." "Maybe," Keanu said calmly, "but here's something you can't buy your way out of." As if on cue, the sound of multiple vehicles echoed through the parking garage. Headlights swept across the concrete walls as 3 police cars pulled into the underground space, their lights flashing but their sirens silent. Officers emerged from the vehicles, moving quickly to surround the group. Marcus appeared behind them, his phone in hand. He had called the police the moment Keanu entered the garage, just as they had planned. "Richard Caldwell, Richard Harrison," one of the officers announced, stepping forward. "You're both under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to discriminate against hotel guests in violation of civil rights laws." Harrison immediately began protesting, his voice rising to a desperate pitch. "This is a mistake. We haven't done anything wrong. This man is setting us up." But Caldwell was silent, his eyes fixed on Keanu with a hatred that seemed to burn through the dim light of the parking garage. As the officers moved to handcuff him, he finally spoke. "You think this changes anything?" Caldwell said quietly, his voice dripping with contempt. "People like me built this country. People like you just get to play pretend in movies. When this is over, when my lawyers have finished with you, you'll regret ever crossing me." Keanu walked closer to Caldwell, close enough that only the two of them could hear what was said next. His voice was soft, but carried a weight that years of hardship and loss had forged into something unshakable. "You know what the saddest part of all this is?" Keanu said. "It's not the money you stole or the laws you broke. It's that you had everything: success, influence, the ability to make a real difference in people's lives. And you chose to use it to make others feel small. You chose greed over generosity, prejudice over compassion. You could have been remembered as someone who lifted people up. Instead, you'll be remembered as someone who tore them down." Caldwell's jaw tightened, but for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Not remorse, perhaps, but a recognition that Keanu's words had struck something true. Keanu stepped back as the officers led Caldwell and Harrison toward the waiting police cars. Daniel Foster stood off to the side, his face a mask of shame and fear. One of the officers approached him as well. "Mr. Foster, you'll need to come with us for questioning. Your cooperation in this matter will be noted." Daniel nodded weakly, unable to look at Keanu, as he was escorted away. Marcus approached Keanu, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. Are you okay? Keanu watched the police cars begin to pull away, their lights painting red and blue shadows on the garage walls. I'm fine. It's over. But even as he said the words, Keanu knew that the work was just beginning. Caldwell and Harrison had been the architects of this corruption, but they had not acted alone. There were employees who had followed their orders, supervisors who had turned a blind eye, and a culture of judgment that had taken root in every corner of the Meridian Grand Hotel. Removing the disease was only the first step. Now came the harder task of healing the wounds it had left behind. As Keanu walked out of the parking garage and into the cool night air, he thought about what lay ahead tomorrow. There would be meetings with lawyers and board members, conversations with employees, and difficult decisions about who could stay and who needed to go. There would be media attention, public scrutiny, and the inevitable criticism that came with any high-profile confrontation. But tonight, standing under the stars with the weight of justice finally tilting in the right direction, Keanu allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. He had built the Meridian Grand Hotel to be a place where everyone was welcome, where dignity was not a privilege reserved for the wealthy and powerful. That dream had been corrupted, twisted into something ugly by men who saw people as nothing more than profit margins and status symbols. Now he had a chance to set things right. Marcus, Keanu said quietly, I need you to arrange a meeting with all the hotel staff for tomorrow afternoon. Everyone from management to housekeeping. It's time they heard from me directly. Marcus nodded, already pulling out his phone to make the arrangements. What are you going to tell them? Keanu looked back at the Meridian Grand Hotel, its elegant facade glowing softly in the night. He thought about Elena Rodriguez, who had risked her job to tell the truth. He thought about the guests who had been turned away or treated poorly because of how they looked. He thought about the employees who had been pressured to follow discriminatory orders against their better judgment. The truth, Keanu said funnily. I'm going to tell them the truth, and then we're going to start rebuilding together. The weeks that followed the arrests of Richard Harrison and Richard Caldwell were among the most challenging of Keanu Reeves's life. The media descended upon the Meridian Grand Hotel like a swarm, hungry for details about the corruption scandal that had rocked one of Los Angeles's most prestigious establishments. Reporters camped outside the entrance. Cameras flashed at every employee who entered or exited, and the story dominated headlines for days. But Keanu refused to hide. He faced the press with the same quiet dignity that had defined his public life for decades. He answered questions honestly, acknowledged that failures had occurred under his ownership, and promised that justice would be served and changes would be made. He did not deflect blame or make excuses. He simply told the truth and committed to doing better. The legal proceedings moved faster than anyone expected. The evidence against Harrison and Caldwell was overwhelming. The recording Keanu had made in the parking garage captured their admissions of discrimination and financial fraud in their own voices, combined with the financial records Daniel Foster had provided, the testimony of Elena Rodriguez and other employees, and the documented pattern of mistreatment Marcus Chen had uncovered. The prosecution built an airtight case. Richard Harrison, once the powerful head of guest relations who had terrorized staff and demeaned guests for years, was convicted on multiple counts of embezzlement, fraud, and civil rights violation. The judge, a stern woman in her 60 seconds, who had clearly been moved by the testimony of guests who had suffered under Harrison's regime, delivered a sentence of 8 years in federal prison. As Harrison was led away in handcuffs, his face was a mask of disbelief. He had spent so long believing he was untouchable that he could not comprehend how completely his world had collapsed. Richard Caldwell's fall was even more dramatic. As a prominent business figure with connections throughout the hospitality industry, he had expected his lawyers and influence to protect him. But the evidence was too damning and public opinion had turned sharply against him. He was stripped of all his positions on the board of directors, not just at the Meridian Grand, but at 3 other companies where he had held seats. He was ordered to pay nearly $2 million in restitution to guests who had been discriminated against and to the hotel itself for the funds he had helped embezzle. And in a ruling that sent shock waves through the business community, He was banned from serving in any executive or advisory capacity in the hospitality industry for 10 years. On the day of Caldwell's sentencing, Keanu sat in the courtroom and watched as the man who had once threatened to destroy him was led away by federal marshals. Caldwell's silver hair was disheveled now, his expensive suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow with the realization of everything he had lost. As he passed Keanu's row, he paused for just a moment, and their eyes met. There was no hatred in Keanu's gaze, no triumph, only a quiet sadness for a man who had possessed so much and squandered it all in pursuit of more. As a final measure, Keanu personally ensured that both Harrison and Caldwell were permanently banned from entering any property he owned or had any stake in. It was a symbolic gesture, perhaps, but it sent a clear message there would be no place in his world for those who treated human dignity as negotiable. With the legal matters resolved, Keanu turned his full attention to rebuilding the Meridian Grand Hotel from the inside out. He knew that removing Harrison and Caldwell was only the first step. The culture they had created had infected every level of the organization, and uprooting it would require more than just new policies. It would require a fundamental shift in how people thought about their work and their responsibility to others. The first and most important decision was what to do about Daniel Foster. The manager had cooperated with the investigation after his arrest, providing testimony that had been crucial in securing convictions, but he had also betrayed Keanu's trust, luring him into what could have been a dangerous trap. It would have been easy to fire him, to make an example of someone who had chosen self-preservation over integrity. But Keanu saw something more complicated when he looked at Daniel. He saw a man who had been afraid, who had made a terrible choice under pressure, but who had ultimately helped bring the truth to light. He saw someone who deserved a second chance to prove that one mistake did not have to define a lifetime. Daniel Keanu said during their private meeting in his office, "What you did in that parking garage was wrong. You put me in danger and you betrayed the trust I had placed in you." Daniel sat across from him, his eyes red and his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I know, Mr. Reeves. I don't expect you to forgive me. I was weak and scared, and I made a choice I'll regret for the rest of my life." Keanu was quiet for a moment, studying the man before him. "But you also came forward with the financial records. You testified against Harrison and Caldwell when it would have been easier to stay silent. That took courage." Daniel looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "It was the least I could do, after everything I let happen under my watch. After everything I should have stopped years ago, I owed it to you and to everyone who was hurt." Keanu nodded slowly. "I believe in second chances, Daniel. I believe that people can learn from their mistakes and become better. So here's what I'm offering you. You can stay on as manager, but with reduced responsibilities until you've proven that you can be trusted again. You'll work closely with me and with the new head of guest relations to rebuild this hotel's culture. And if you ever compromise your integrity again, you'll be gone. No warnings, no appeals. Do you understand?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back and nodded firmly. "I understand. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. I won't let you down again." The question of who would replace Harrison as head of guest relations was one that Keanu had been considering since the night of the arrests. He needed someone who understood the hotel intimately, someone who had demonstrated integrity under pressure, someone who would treat every guest with the respect they deserved regardless of appearance or background. The answer was obvious. Elena Rodriguez was in the break room finishing her lunch. When Keanu found her, she stood up quickly, smoothing her housekeeping uniform, her eyes wide with surprise. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "I didn't expect to see you here. Is everything all right?" Keanu smiled warmly and gestured for her to sit back down. "Everything is fine, Elena. Better than fine. Actually, I came to talk to you about something important." He took a seat across from her, just as he had during their first conversation weeks ago. "Elena, you've worked at this hotel for 6 years, and all that time, you never compromised your values. You treated every guest with respect, even when you were being pressured to do otherwise. And when it mattered most, you had the courage to tell the truth, knowing it could cost you everything." Elena shook her head, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what was right, Mr. Reeves. Anyone would have done the same. That's where you're wrong, Keanu said gently. Not everyone would have. Most people looked the other way. Most people followed orders because it was easier than standing up, but you didn't. And that's exactly the kind of person I need leading guest relations at this hotel. Elena's eyes went wide. Guest relations, Mr. Reeves. I'm a housekeeper. I don't have experience in management. I don't have a fancy degree or connections. I clean rooms. Keanu leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. Elena, I've met plenty of people with fancy degrees and connections. Some of them are in prison right now. What you have is something that can't be taught in any business school. You have character. You have compassion. You understand that every person who walks through our doors deserves to be treated with dignity, whether they're wearing a $3,000 suit or jeans and a t-shirt. He paused, letting his words sink in. I'm offering you the position of Director of Guest Relations. You'll receive full training and support, a significant salary increase, and the authority to reshape how this hotel treats its guests. What do you say? Elena was silent for a long moment, her eyes glistening with emotion. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. My mother used to tell me that kindness was its own reward, that doing the right thing might not make you rich or powerful, but it would let you sleep at night. She never got to see me become anything more than a housekeeper. She looked up at Keanu, a single tear rolling down her cheek. She would have been so proud. Keanu reached across the table and placed his hand gently on hers. She would be proud, and so am I. The staff meeting was held 3 days later in the hotel's grand ballroom. Every employee was required to attend, from the executives to the housekeeping staff. From the concierge to the kitchen workers, nearly 200 people filled the elegant space, sitting in rows of chairs that had been arranged facing a small stage. Keanu stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces before him. Some looked nervous, uncertain about their futures. Others looked hopeful, relieved that the corruption had finally been exposed. A few, he noticed, looked defiant. Perhaps employees who had benefited from the old system and resented its destruction. He took a deep breath and began to speak. Thank you all for being here today, Keanu said, his voice calm, but carrying clearly through the room. The past few weeks have been difficult for everyone. This hotel has been through a storm, and I know many of you are wondering what comes next. I'm here to tell you, he paused, letting the silence settle over the room. When I first invested in the Meridian Grand Hotel almost 4 years ago, I had a vision. I wanted to create a place where excellence and compassion went hand in hand. A place where every guest, regardless of who they were or where they came from, would feel welcomed and valued. I believe that was what we were building here. His expression grew more serious. I was wrong. Not about the vision, but about what was actually happening inside these walls. For years, a system of discrimination operated in this hotel. A system that judged people by their appearance, their clothes, the color of their skin. Guests were turned away, humiliated, made to feel worthless, all in the name of maintaining some twisted idea of prestige. Keanu looked around the room, meeting the eyes of individual employees. I'm not here to blame all of you. I know that many of you were put in impossible positions, pressured to follow orders that went against your conscience. Some of you pushed back and suffered for it. Others went along because you were afraid of losing your jobs, your livelihoods, your ability to support your families. He took another breath. But I am here to tell you that those days are over. From this moment forward, the Meridian Grand Hotel will operate according to a simple principle. Every person who walks through our doors deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, not because of what they can pay, not because of how they look, but because they are human beings. A murmur rippled through the crowd, some employees nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. I understand that change is hard, Keanu continued. I understand that some of you may not agree with this philosophy. If that's the case, I won't force you to stay. But if you do stay, I expect you to embrace this principle fully. There will be training programs for everyone, resources to help you understand why this matters and how to put it into practice, and there will be accountability. He gestured toward Alina, who sat in the front row, still looking slightly overwhelmed by her new position. Many of you know Elena Rodriguez. She's worked in housekeeping for 6 years, and during all that time, she never once compromised her integrity. She treated every guest with kindness and respect, even when she was told not to. Starting today, she is our new director of guest relations. A surprised murmur went through the crowd, followed by scattered applause that grew louder as more employees joined in. Alina stood briefly, acknowledging the recognition with a humble nod, her cheeks flushed with emotion. We're also implementing new systems to ensure that what happened here can never happen again, Keanu explained. Anonymous feedback channels for guests and employees alike. Regular reviews of service quality that don't just measure efficiency, but measure how people feel when they interact with our staff. And an open-door policy that means anyone, from the newest hire to the most senior manager, can bring concerns directly to me without fear of retaliation. He paused, looking out at the assembled employees one final time. I know some of you are skeptical. You've heard speeches before, promises that things would change, only to see everything stay the same. I understand that skepticism. I can only ask you to give me a chance to prove that this time is different. Keanu's voice softened, taking on a more personal tone. Someone once asked me why I care so much about how people are treated. After all, I'm a successful actor. I could just focus on my career, my projects, my own life. But here's what I've learned over the years. Success means nothing if it comes at the expense of others. Wealth means nothing if it's built on a foundation of cruelty. And prestige means nothing if it requires us to diminish the dignity of another human being. He looked around the room once more. When you go home tonight, I want you to think about why you got into this business. Most of you didn't dream of turning people away or making them feel small. You wanted to create experiences, to make people happy, to be part of something that mattered. That's what I want this hotel to be again. A place where we lift people up instead of tearing them down. A place where everyone, employee and guest alike, can feel proud to be part of. Keanu stepped back from the podium. Thank you for listening. Now, let's get to work. The applause that followed was not unanimous, but it was genuine. As the employees filed out of the ballroom, many stopped to shake Keanu's hand or simply to thank him for what he had said. Alina lingered near the door, watching the scene with tears in her eyes. The transformation of the Meridian Grand Hotel did not happen overnight. There were setbacks and challenges. Employees who could not or would not adapt to the new culture. Systems that needed to be redesigned and rebuilt. But slowly, steadily, things began to change. Guest reviews started to reflect the difference. Stories appeared on travel websites about the exceptional service, the genuine warmth, the feeling of being truly welcomed regardless of appearance or background. Word spread through communities that had long felt unwelcome at luxury establishments that the Meridian Grand was different, that it was a place where everyone was treated like they belonged. 6 months after the arrests, Keanu stood in the lobby of his hotel on a quiet evening. He wore simple clothes, much like he had on that first night when he had been turned away by Victor. But this time, no one looked at him with judgment or suspicion. Staff members smiled and greeted him warmly as they passed. Guests of every background mingled in the elegant space, all receiving the same attentive, respectful service. Alina approached him, a tablet in her hand showing the latest guest satisfaction scores. They were the highest in the hotel's history. We did it, she said softly, standing beside him. We really did it. Keanu watched as a family entered the lobby, a couple with 2 young children who looked around with wide-eyed wonder at the beautiful space. They were dressed simply, clearly not wealthy, but the staff greeted them with the same enthusiasm they would show to any billionaire. A bellhop immediately offered to help with their bags, while a concierge approached to personally escort them to the front desk. No, Keanu said quietly, a gentle smile crossing his face. You did it, all of you. I just reminded everyone what we were supposed to be doing all along. He turned to look at Alina, pride evident in his eyes. You know, when I started in this business in the film industry, I learned something important. The biggest stars aren't the ones who demand the most attention or treat others like they're beneath them. The biggest stars are the ones who make everyone around them feel valued, who remember that every single person on a set, from the director to the person holding the boom microphone, is essential to creating something beautiful. Elena nodded thoughtfully. It's the same in hospitality. The guest doesn't just interact with one person. They interact with everyone. From the valet who parks their car to the housekeeper who turns down their bed, every interaction matters. Exactly. Keanu agreed. And when every interaction is filled with genuine respect and kindness, you create something that no amount of marble floors or crystal chandeliers can match. You create a feeling, a sense that this moment matters. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the lobby come alive with the evening's guests. Then Elena spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Reeves, can I ask you something?" "Of course. That first night when you came in dressed like a regular person and they threw you out, you could have revealed who you were immediately. You could have fired everyone on the spot and been done with it." "Why didn't you?" Keanu considered the question for a long moment. "Because I needed to understand." He finally said, "If I had just punished the people who mistreated me, I would have only solved the surface problem. The real issue was deeper, a whole way of thinking that had infected this place. To fix it, I had to experience it, to feel what our guests were feeling, and I had to find the people like you, Elena, the ones who had kept their integrity despite everything." He turned to face her fully. "You know what I realized through all of this? The true measure of a person, or a company, or a hotel, isn't how they treat the powerful and the privileged. It's how they treat the vulnerable, the overlooked, the ones who seemingly have nothing to offer in return. That's where character reveals itself." Elena smiled, a warmth spreading across her features. "My mother used to say something similar. She would say that kindness is like a mirror. How you treat others reflects who you really are inside." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Elena said softly, "and I think she would have liked you, Mr. Reeves." Keanu laughed gently. "I think I would have liked her too." As the evening deepened and the lobby gradually quieted, Keanu took one last look around the space that had caused him so much pain and ultimately so much growth. The Meridian Grand Hotel was no longer just a business investment to him. It was a testament to what was possible when people chose compassion over convenience, integrity over profit, dignity over discrimination. He thought about Harrison and Caldwell locked away and stripped of everything they had valued. He thought about Daniel Foster working diligently to rebuild the trust he had broken. He thought about Victor and Amanda and all the others who had been let go, hopeful, learning from their mistakes and doing better in their next chapters. And he thought about Elena, the quiet housekeeper who had become a leader, proving that character and courage mattered more than credentials or connections. Outside, the Los Angeles nights sparkled with a million lights, each one representing a story, a life, a person deserving of respect. Keanu smiled to himself as he headed for the door, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new guests, new opportunities to prove that the Meridian Grand Hotel had truly changed. But for tonight he was content. He had set out to experience his hotel through the eyes of an ordinary guest. And in doing so, he had discovered something extraordinary. Not just the corruption that had been hiding in the shadows, but the goodness that had been waiting to emerge. The Meridian Grand Hotel was no longer a place where people were judged by their appearance. It was a place where everyone, from the wealthiest celebrity to the most humble traveler, could walk through the doors and feel exactly the same thing.